Bloodstains don't wash out of silk, and secrets don't stay buried in New York City. Chloe Harper thought a thrift store wardrobe could erase her past, turning her into a ghost. She was wrong. The city's most ruthless crime syndicate leader just walked in, and he sees everything. To survive in Manhattan when there is a $50,000 bounty on your head, you have to become a part of the city's gray background. For 24-year-old Chloe Harper, survival meant erasing every trace of the woman she used to be. The dazzling, sharp-witted daughter of a notorious Chicago underworld accountant was dead. In her place stood Sarah, a clumsy, perpetually exhausted prep cook working in the damp, windowless kitchen of Trattoria Bellini on 46th Street in Hell's Kitchen. Chloe's disguise was an art form, born of sheer desperation. She hid her striking hourglass figure, the one that used to turn heads in high society galas, beneath layers of suffocating fabric. Even in the sweltering heat of the commercial kitchen, she wore men's flannel shirts 3 sizes too large, thick undershirts that flattened her chest, and heavily distressed baggy cargo pants, cinched tight at the waist with a frayed leather belt. Her long, raven-black hair, which once fell in cascading waves, was chopped unevenly at the shoulders and hidden beneath a grease-stained baseball cap. She slouched, rounding her shoulders to appear smaller, meeker, and entirely unremarkable. For 8 months, the strategy had worked flawlessly. To her co-workers, she was just the quiet girl who scrubbed pots, kept her head down, and never spoke of her past. But invisibility is a fragile illusion, and it shatters the moment the wrong person looks closely enough. It was a rainy Tuesday evening when the atmosphere inside Trattoria Bellini shifted from chaotic to suffocatingly tense. The kitchen staff, usually loud and boisterous, fell into a terrified hush. Mr. Henderson, the usually red-faced and screaming restaurant manager, was sweating profusely, his hands trembling as he tied a fresh apron around his waist. "Rossi is here," a waitress named Jenna whispered, bursting through the swinging kitchen doors. Her face was entirely drained of color. Gabriel Rossi, and he brought his guys. Chloe felt a cold spike of adrenaline pierce her chest. Gabriel Rossi. The name was a phantom whisper in the criminal underworld, a man whose reputation for ruthless efficiency and terrifying intellect preceded him. He had recently seized control of the entire western seaboard's shipping ports, and his aggressive expansion into the New York territories had left a trail of dismantled rival families. He was not a man who visited a mid-tier Italian restaurant on a Tuesday unless he was claiming territory. "Keep your heads down," Mr. Henderson hissed at the kitchen staff. "No eye contact. Just cook." Chloe immediately shrank back toward the industrial sinks, plunging her hands into the scalding, soapy water. She needed to be invisible. She scrubbed a cast-iron skillet so hard her knuckles turned white, praying that Rossi would eat his meal, extort whoever he came to extort, and leave. But fate has a cruel sense of humor. 20 minutes later, chaos erupted, not from a gunshot, but from a mundane disaster. Jenna, rushing back into the kitchen with a towering tray of empty wine glasses and dirty plates, slipped on a slick patch of olive oil near the prep station. As Jenna fell with a scream, sending the heavy tray hurtling toward the hard tile floor, Chloe reacted before she could stop herself. The years of intensive martial arts training her paranoid father had forced upon her kicked in. She dropped her scrubbing brush, pivoting on her heel with lightning speed. In one fluid, explosive motion, Chloe slid across the floor, catching the heavy metal tray with one hand just inches before it shattered against the tiles, while using her other arm to brace Jenna's fall, preventing the waitress from cracking her skull. It was a display of breathtaking agility, balance, and physical strength, a movement entirely impossible for the clumsy, slouching girl Chloe pretended to be. Breathing heavily, Chloe looked up. The swinging kitchen doors were wide open. Standing just beyond the threshold, framed by the dim, romantic lighting of the main dining room, was Gabriel Rossi. He was a terrifyingly handsome man, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a bespoke midnight blue suit that screamed quiet wealth. His sharp jawline and piercing obsidian eyes gave him the look of a predatory bird, and he was looking directly at her. Time seemed to freeze. Gabriel's dark eyes locked onto Chloe's. In that split second of extreme physical exertion, Chloe had lost her slouch. Her spine was perfectly straight, her muscles coiled with feline grace. Worse, the violent movement had caused the top buttons of her oversized flannel to pop open, and the heavy fabric had slipped off her left shoulder, briefly pulling the baggy material taut against her torso. For a fraction of a second, the striking, undeniable curve of her waist and the swell of her chest were perfectly silhouetted under the harsh fluorescent kitchen lights. Chloe immediately dropped the tray with a loud, clumsy clatter, intentionally letting a few glasses shatter, and hunched her shoulders forward, scrambling backward like a frightened mouse. She pulled the flannel tight around herself, burying her face under her cap, but it was too late. Gabriel Rossi was not a man who missed details. He had built his empire by seeing the things others tried to hide. He watched the frantic, oversized girl retreat into the shadows, his eyes narrowing in intense calculation. He had seen the way she moved, like a trained killer, not a dishwasher. And for that brief, fleeting second, he had seen the shape of the woman hiding beneath the thrift store armor. Gabriel tilted his head slightly, a dangerous, barely perceptible smirk playing on his lips. He turned to his right-hand man, a massive enforcer named Vincent Gallo. "Vinny," Gabriel murmured, his voice a low, gravelly baritone that somehow cut through the restaurant's ambient noise. "The girl in the back, the one in the flannel. Have her serve my table." "Mr. Rossi, please. She's just a dishwasher," Mr. Henderson stammered, blocking the kitchen door with his own body. He was practically vibrating with terror. "She doesn't know the menu. She's terribly clumsy. I will have our head waiter." "I didn't ask for your head waiter, Henderson," Gabriel interrupted, his tone conversational but laced with a lethal edge. He didn't raise his voice, but the sudden silence in the room was deafening. "I asked for her." Behind the swinging doors, Chloe closed her eyes, cursing her own reflexes. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Running was not an option. Vincent Gallo was already standing near the back exit, lighting a cigarette with casual menace. If she bolted now, she would only confirm she was someone worth chasing. She had to play the part. She had to be Sarah, the pathetic, invisible girl. Wiping her wet, trembling hands on her stained apron, Chloe pushed through the doors. She kept her chin tucked to her chest, her shoulders rolled aggressively forward to make the baggy flannel tent over her body. She shuffled her feet, dragging the heels of her worn-out sneakers against the floorboards as she approached the private booth at the back of the restaurant. Gabriel was seated alone at the table, a glass of expensive Barolo wine in his hand. He watched her approach with the predatory patience of a wolf stalking a wounded deer. "You asked for me, sir?" Chloe mumbled, deepening her voice, making it raspy and small. She kept her eyes glued to the polished mahogany table, deliberately allowing her hands to shake as she pulled a notepad from her apron pocket. "Sit down," Gabriel commanded softly. Chloe blinked, looking up in genuine shock before quickly dropping her gaze again. "I have to take your order, sir. I'm not allowed to sit." I own this restaurant as of 20 minutes ago, Sarah, Gabriel replied smoothly, pulling her fake name from his impeccable memory of the employee roster his men had already secured. If I tell you to sit, you sit. Chloe slowly slid into the booth opposite him. Up close, Gabriel's presence was overwhelming. He smelled of rain, expensive cedar, and gunpowder. You have incredible reflexes for a dishwasher, Gabriel noted, taking a slow sip of his wine. His dark eyes roamed over her ridiculous outfit, dissecting the layers. A heavy tray, a falling woman. You caught both, and you moved with perfect tactical balance. Where did you learn that? I just got lucky, Chloe stammered, forcing a nervous hiccup. I used to play softball. Gabriel chuckled, a dark, rich sound that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Softball. Right. He leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Why are you wearing clothes meant for a man twice your size, Sarah? What are you hiding under there? Panic flared hot in Chloe's chest. He knew. He didn't know who she was yet, but he knew what she was doing. I just like being comfortable, she lied, wrapping her arms around her torso defensively. Before Gabriel could press further, the front glass windows of Trattoria Bellini shattered into a million glittering pieces. The roar of automatic gunfire drowned out the screams of the remaining patrons. Arthur Caldwell, Gabriel's primary rival in the New York underworld, had made his move. 3 men in black tactical gear poured through the broken facade, their weapons trained directly on Gabriel's booth. Time fragmented. Vincent Gallo roared, drawing his weapon and returning fire from the bar, but he was pinned down. Gabriel lunged sideways, reaching inside his jacket for his own firearm. But Chloe was faster. The instinct to survive violently overpowered her need to hide. As one of Caldwell's men vaulted over a table, leveling his weapon at Gabriel's blind spot, Chloe moved. She didn't cower. She didn't scream. She launched herself across the booth. Her foot caught the edge of the heavy oak table, kicking it upward with astonishing force to act as a wooden shield against the incoming hail of bullets. Splinters erupted around them. As she dove over the table to tackle Gabriel out of the line of fire, her baggy flannel shirt snagged viciously on a jagged piece of metal protruding from the shattered light fixture above them. Momentum carried her forward. The heavy, oversized shirt tore straight down the back, trapping her arms. To avoid being a sitting duck, Chloe did the only thing she could. She twisted violently, tearing her arms free of the sleeves and leaving the shredded flannel hanging on the fixture. She hit the floor hard beside Gabriel, rolling smoothly behind the overturned table. The heavy, obscuring layers were gone. Left behind was just Chloe, wearing a tight, black, ribbed tank top that clung to her body like a second skin. Stripped of the bulky camouflage, her true figure was instantly, breathtakingly obvious. The narrow, sculpted waist, the full, undeniable curves, and the fierce, athletic grace of a woman built for survival. But it wasn't just her curves that caught Gabriel's eye as he crouched beside her in the rain of bullets. As Chloe reached down, pulling a sleek, tactical throwing knife from a hidden sheath strapped to her thigh, her tank top rode up slightly. There, inked into the smooth skin of her lower hip, was a very specific, undeniable tattoo. A black rose intertwined with a ledger, the emblem of the Chicago Syndicate, the mark of Richard Harper's bloodline. Gabriel effortlessly dropped one of the approaching gunmen with a suppressed shot from his weapon, but his eyes were fixated entirely on the woman beside him. The clumsy, frumpy dishwasher was gone. In her place was a lethal, stunningly beautiful syndicate heiress, holding a blade with the confidence of an assassin. "Well, well," Gabriel murmured over the sound of gunfire, a terrifying, possessive grin spreading across his face as he looked at her true form. "You aren't a ghost after all, Chloe Harper. You're a masterpiece." The acrid scent of cordite and copper hung heavy in the ruined dining room of Trattoria Bellini. Sirens wailed in the distant, rain-slicked streets of Hell's Kitchen, a stark reminder that the police were on their way, however slowly they responded to mob-owned establishments. Chloe Harper didn't wait for the smoke to clear. The moment the last of Arthur Caldwell's hitmen hit the floor, choking on his own blood from Gabriel's final shot, she scrambled backward. Her cover was blown. The $50,000 bounty on her head might as well have been stamped on her forehead in neon lights. She needed to vanish, and she needed to do it now. She bolted for the shattered kitchen doors, her combat boots finding purchase on the blood-slicked tile. But she only made it 3 steps before a massive, immovable force blocked her path. Vincent Gallo, Gabriel's colossal enforcer, stepped out of the shadows, his weapon lowered but his posture screaming a silent, lethal warning. "Going somewhere, Sarah?" Gabriel's voice echoed behind her, devoid of panic. It was a smooth, chilling baritone that sent a shiver down Chloe's spine. She turned slowly, her hands raised in a placating gesture, though every muscle in her body was coiled to strike. Gabriel stood amidst the wreckage, dusting broken glass from the lapel of his ruined bespoke suit. His dark eyes remained fixed on her, sweeping over her unhidden form. Without the heavy, suffocating layers of flannel and undershirts, Chloe's striking hourglass figure was impossible to ignore. The tight, black-ribbed tank top clung to her torso, emphasizing the fierce, athletic grace of her waist and the undeniable curves she had spent 8 agonizing months hiding. "Let me walk, Rossi," Chloe warned, dropping the raspy, meek voice she had used as the dishwasher. Her natural tone was commanding, laced with the icy authority she had learned from her father, the late Richard Harper. "You have Caldwell to worry about. You don't need my baggage." "Your baggage, Chloe Harper, is exactly what makes you interesting," Gabriel replied, stepping over a fallen table and closing the distance between them. The way he said her real name felt like a brand. "Your father was the chief accountant for the Chicago syndicate before his untimely demise. He hid $50 million before his rivals butchered him. Caldwell wants that money. Donovan Hayes, your father's traitorous lieutenant, wants that money. And they both want the missing heiress who knows the cipher to the accounts." Chloe's jaw tightened. "I don't have the cipher." Gabriel stopped mere inches from her. Up close, his overwhelming physical presence was dizzying. He reached out, his warm, rough fingers lightly tracing the exposed skin of her shoulder where the flannel had been torn away. The touch was electric, possessive, and terrifyingly gentle. "I don't care about the cipher," Gabriel murmured, his dark eyes dropping briefly to the black rose tattoo partially visible on her hip, then rising to meet her fierce gaze. "I care about the woman who caught a falling waitress, deflected a spray of bullets with an oak table, and carries a tactical throwing knife under a thrift store disguise. You aren't a frightened runaway, Chloe. You're a weapon. And right now, you are coming with me." Refusal was futile. Within an hour, Chloe found herself locked not in a dungeon, but in the highest, most impenetrable fortress in Manhattan, Gabriel Rossi's penthouse suite. The gilded cage boasted floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, impenetrable security, and a silence that felt heavier than the kitchen at the trattoria. When Gabriel finally entered the lavish guest quarters later that evening, he wasn't carrying a weapon. He was carrying a sleek black garment bag. He tossed it onto the massive king-sized bed. "No more flannel," Gabriel ordered smoothly, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed over a fresh, tailored black shirt. "Your invisible act is over. If Caldwell knows you're in New York, hiding in the shadows will only get you killed in an alley. From now on, you hide in plain sight. Beside me." Chloe approached the bed cautiously. She unzipped the bag, her breath catching in her throat. Inside was a breathtaking emerald green silk evening gown, accompanied by a structured leather harness holster, designed to sit flush against the ribs. "You want me to wear this?" Chloe asked, looking up at him in disbelief. "It leaves absolutely nothing to the imagination. You spent nearly a year hiding your beauty and your strength because you thought it made you a target," Gabriel said, his voice dropping an octave, raw and intensely focused. "I want you to weaponize it. Caldwell's men are looking for a frumpy, exhausted ghost. They aren't looking for the stunning woman on the arm of a mafia boss." Chloe ran her fingers over the cool silk. A dangerous, thrilling realization bloomed in her chest. For 8 months, she had lived in terror, shrinking herself down to nothing. Gabriel Rossi wasn't asking her to hide. He was asking her to go to war. She turned her back to him, pulling the baggy, ruined tank top over her head without hesitation, letting it fall to the floor. She heard Gabriel's sharp intake of breath as the soft lighting illuminated the scars on her back, the brutal history of her escape from Chicago. She didn't cower. She stepped into the emerald silk, letting the fabric mold perfectly to her curvy figure, hugging her waist and flaring dangerously at her hips. She strapped the leather holster over the silk, sliding her blade into place. When she finally turned around, Gabriel was staring at her with an intensity that could melt steel. The hunger in his eyes wasn't just physical. It was a profound, possessive recognition. He had seen through her secret, and he wanted everything she was. "We are going to Caldwell's underground casino," Gabriel stated, his voice a low, rough growl as he offered her his arm. "And we are going to burn his empire to the ground." The underground casino, hidden beneath a luxury hotel in Tribeca, was a playground for the corrupt and the violently wealthy. The air was thick with cigar smoke, the clinking of crystal tumblers, and the hushed whispers of illicit deals. When Gabriel Rossi stepped out of the private elevator, the room fell into a tense, breathless silence. But it wasn't the ruthless mafia boss that drew every eye in the room. It was the woman walking beside him. Chloe Harper commanded the space with a lethal, intoxicating grace. The emerald green silk gown clung to her curves like liquid glass, the high slit exposing miles of toned leg with every confident stride. Her raven hair, no longer hidden under a greasy cap, fell in loose, dramatic waves around her shoulders. She wore her beauty not as an accessory, but as armor. She felt the heavy, lustful stares of the cartel bosses, politicians, and syndicates, but she only had eyes for her target. Sitting in the high-stakes VIP alcove across the room was Arthur Caldwell, flanked by none other than Donovan Hayes, the traitor who had sold her father out to the highest bidder. "Remember the plan," Gabriel murmured, his hand resting firmly on the small of her back. The heat of his touch anchored her, a burning reminder that they were in this together. "You distract Donovan. You get him away from Caldwell's guards. I'll handle the rest." "Don't underestimate me, Rossi," Chloe whispered back, a fierce, wicked smile playing on her crimson lips. "I'm not just a distraction." Gabriel chuckled softly, a sound that rumbled against her side. "I would never make that mistake, Mia Regina." My queen. Chloe detached herself from Gabriel's side, moving through the sea of dangerous men like a shark cutting through water. She approached the VIP alcove just as Donovan Hayes ordered another whiskey. As she stepped into the dim light of the booth, Donovan looked up. Annoyance flickered across his scarred face, rapidly replaced by predatory interest as he took in her stunning figure, before finally settling into absolute, paralyzing horror. "Hello, Donovan," Chloe said smoothly, her voice carrying the exact aristocratic cadence of her late father. "I hear you've been looking for me." "Chloe," Donovan choked out, stumbling backward against the velvet booth. Caldwell's guards instantly reached for their jackets, but Donovan waved them off, his greed overriding his panic. If he brought her in quietly, he could claim the cipher for himself. "You shouldn't be here." "I got tired of hiding," she said, leaning slightly over the table. The movement was deliberate, the silk gown dipping to capture his undivided attention, blinding him to the shadows moving behind him. "I know where the 50 million is, Donovan. Let's take a walk to the private vaults, just you and me. Unless you want Caldwell taking your cut. Greed is a predictable poison." Donovan swallowed hard, his eyes darting to Caldwell, who was distracted by a commotion at the roulette tables, a commotion orchestrated entirely by Vincent Gallo. "Show me," Donovan hissed, stepping out of the booth and grabbing her arm roughly. Chloe let him lead her away from the crowded floor, down a mirrored hallway toward the private counting rooms. The moment the heavy soundproof doors sealed behind them, cutting off the noise of the casino, Donovan shoved her against the wall, drawing a suppressed pistol. "The cipher. Give it to me now, you little brat," he snarled, pressing the cold barrel under her chin. Chloe didn't flinch. She simply smiled. "I don't have it." Before Donovan could react to the lie, the shadows behind him detached from the wall. Gabriel Rossi moved with the silent, terrifying speed of an apex predator. His massive hand clamped over Donovan's wrist, twisting violently until the bone snapped with a sickening crack. The pistol clattered to the floor. Donovan screamed, but Gabriel drove his knee into the traitor's abdomen, sending him crashing to the carpet. "You talk too much, Hayes," Gabriel growled, pinning the man beneath his boot. Suddenly, the counting room doors burst open. Arthur Caldwell stood in the doorway, flanked by 4 heavily armed guards. The commotion upstairs had been a brief distraction. Caldwell had realized too late who the woman in the emerald dress was. "Kill them both," Caldwell ordered, raising his weapon. Gabriel reached for his gun, but he was outnumbered in a tight space. This was the moment Chloe had planned for. The moment she stopped being a survivor and became an executioner. In a blur of motion, Chloe reached under the silk folds of her gown. She drew the tactical throwing knife from her rib holster. With flawless, lethal precision, she hurled the blade. It struck Caldwell's lead guard perfectly in the throat before he could pull the trigger. Using the split second of chaos, Gabriel opened fire, dropping 2 more guards with terrifying accuracy. Chloe didn't freeze. She swept her leg low, kicking Caldwell's dropped weapon straight into Gabriel's waiting hand. Within 5 seconds, the deafening roar of gunfire ceased. Caldwell and his men lay motionless on the plush carpet. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Donovan Hayes whimpering on the floor. Gabriel stood amidst the carnage, his chest heaving. He looked at the bodies, then turned his gaze to Chloe. She stood perfectly poised, her emerald gown unmarked, her breathing steady. She hadn't cowered behind him. She had fought beside him. Gabriel kicked Donovan in the temple, knocking the traitor out cold for his men to collect later, before closing the distance between him and Chloe. He didn't speak. He reached out, wrapping his strong hands around her narrow waist, pulling her flush against his chest. The adrenaline of the fight melted seamlessly into a blinding, possessive heat. Gabriel crashed his lips down onto hers in a searing, demanding kiss. Chloe kissed him back with equal ferocity, her hands tangling in his dark hair, entirely surrendering to the Mafia Boss who had seen through her disguise and set her free. She had hidden her curves, her strength, and her identity in the shadows. But Gabriel Rossi had dragged her into the light, and now they would rule the city together. When Chloe stopped hiding, she didn't just find her freedom, she found a king who was ready to let her reign. From a terrified, baggy-clothed dishwasher to the lethal queen of the Rossi Empire, her secret proved to be her ultimate weapon. What did you think of Chloe's explosive transformation and Gabriel's fierce devotion? If you loved this intense mafia romance, hit that like button, share this story with your friends, and subscribe for more thrilling, dramatic tales.